Hello, today I am filming a video of everything I read for the month of July. So July was a little bit of a different month. I had a lot going on in my personal life in really good ways. I was able to see one of my favorite bands. Live music is something that I really enjoy, and I was lucky enough to see Mumford & Sons this month with some of my family, and that was a really great experience. I've also been battling vertigo lately, which is something completely new in my life. And at 30 years old, it's always a little bit challenging when something new health-wise comes up. So I'm definitely making my way through that challenge currently. But recently, I've been going back and looking at older videos, and I'm starting to really value the longer that I've created videos, being able to have like a time capsule in a certain portion and mindset of my life. And just the longer I do this, the more I value what I'm doing and being able to document what I was thinking, how I was feeling through my reading and through a reading channel has definitely added value and comfort in my life. So I am looking to lean back into that, and you'll notice I have been dedicating a little more time and mental space to this channel, and that is why. So we're going to go over everything I read in the month of July. July reading was a very interesting one. I've sort of made it my focus this summer to read down my physical TBR and all the rereads that I had planned. This is reflected in my random TBR number generator. I went through all of my shelves, numbered everything I wanted to reread and read, and put them all in a spreadsheet. And then whenever I'm looking to pick up a new book or something aside from my planned reading, I go to my computer, I randomly generate a number, and I pick that up off the shelf. This has led to a lot of DNFs this month, way more than I'm used to, but it's also led to a sort of rekindling of my love of shopping my own shelves, remembering that I bought these books for a reason. And I think I talked about it in one of my vlogs this month, but it's interesting because when you are a book collector as well as an avid reader, excitement can really dictate what it is you pick up. So obviously your excitement is highest for whatever you bought at that time, which is why we go out and buy it. But what it does is anything I didn't get to before I purchased that new book now goes down one priority level, and all of my new books are at the top priority. So what that's led to over the years is a handful of books that have just gotten pushed and pushed down. And with this random number generator for my TBR, it's allowed me to remember and remind myself that everything I bought, and my house is surrounded by books. I bought these because at the time I was excited to learn about this story. I was excited to take that journey. So it really has rekindled that love of everything that fills my home. So for that, I'm very thankful. Now, that being said, I'm going to stop talking and we're going to go through everything I read for the month of July. So another update that I do think warrants is I did go ahead and purchase myself a Kobo Clara. So I do currently own a Kobo Libra, but I was having certain issues with it. It was maybe the past 6 to 8 months. It's been very glitchy. It would just randomly start changing fonts. It would just stop working. Now that being said, I use my e-readers quite a lot, multiple hours a week. So it was bound to happen at some point, but I was just having a lot of issues with it, and I thought it was time. I was going through a little bit of a rough patch with my health, and I had saved up. I had my eye. I did my research on what I wanted. I bounced back and forth between getting another Libra and then a Clara, but at the end of the day, I wanted something very small that I could comfortably hold at night, that I could throw in my bags, which I had the tiniest purses in the world, so I needed something that was incredibly small. So I did opt to get the Clara instead, and when I went to the store, it was the very last one, and I like to tell myself that is fate. That's what I like to tell myself anyway. So without further ado, I am going to get into what I read for the month of July. So here you're going to see my spreadsheet. everything here is kind of what I've read, and I'm putting the month alongside it so it's easy to keep track of. And then we have everything I'm currently, that's on the docket to read. So I think first and foremost, I'm going to go through all of the books that I DNF'd. I think that's going to make this the easiest way to go about everything. And I'll give you the reasons why I DNF'd, and we're going to explore kind of how reading changes over the years. So the first book I DNF'd was The Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. So I wound up DNFing this. I think I was about 25% of the way through. I wound up DNFing this specifically because of the choices the writers made in one of the characters. So this essentially, we are following a character that there is a death that takes place, and he is waking up every morning and finding himself in the experience of a different person that was there that night that Evelyn Hardcastle was murdered. So he has an opportunity between 7 different perspectives to figure out what happened to Evelyn, and if he can't figure it out, he dies. I can't quite remember actually, but where I fell off was our main character wakes up one day to find himself, he wakes up one of the mornings to find himself in the body of someone quite different from himself. It's someone that's heavier set, a larger build, and just the way it was handled was making me quite uncomfortable. I think there's a way to describe bodies that are different from your own without it coming across as what I found to be a little bit vicious. I did not like how it was being handled, and it was uncomfortable enough that I was enjoying the story. I was really appreciative of the idea of the story. I thought it was really fascinating, and it was enough of a turnoff how that character was handled, or how they were explaining what it felt like to be in a certain type of body, that I did not want to continue it. Next, I feel like I might not get glowing receptions about this, but next, I DNF Nevernight by Jay Kristoff. My first experience with Jay Kristoff was Empire of the Vampire. It's the first Jay Kristoff I ever read. I really enjoyed it. I have recommended it and sold it to many customers, but this I picked up at a secondhand store. I thought no harm, no foul, and I really did not jive with this. I don't even think I made it 10% of the way through. The writing style is not for me. I don't appreciate how female characters were described or handled in this, and it's just read like bro fantasy to me, and that's the best way I can describe it. Next, I DNF The Ghost of Harvard by Francesca Ciritella. This is one that I bought probably 3 or 4 years ago now. I was very excited to read it at the time, but it wound up being something that I didn't really realize. So I thought this was going to be a contemporary fiction, and while it is, it does also kind of dance along the lines of a little more speculative, a little more haunting. I think it kind of dances the line between thriller and contemporary fiction. So we're following a young woman who is admitted into Harvard, and the story starts on her first day when she's moving in, and very soon we come to find out that her brother also attended Harvard and unfortunately made the decision to unalive himself. And this story does deal a lot with grief, and it deals a lot with trying to move on, but it does delve a little bit into the speculative side where there is a little bit of dancing around, was he being haunted? Is the paranormal real? And that's just not what I was interested in reading. And it just, though the beginning was very hopeful, it wound up going in a direction that I was not interested in. And ultimately, I feel like at 450 pages, it was too long for its own good. So I DNF'd actually quite close to the end. Next, I DNF Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr. This is one that I had on my TBR just for a little bit. I think I bought it last summer when I was in the Valley and I was going to one of my favorite used bookstores, and I just saw it right by the till, and I thought, you know what, I've heard a lot about Cloud Cuckoo Land. I really liked All the Light We Cannot See, so I will give this a go, and unfortunately this was a miss for me. I think this one as well was just far too long. It would have done well with being trimmed down a little bit. I would even say about 100 pages. I DNF'd about halfway through. The old receipt. I DNF'd about halfway through, and for this to be over 600 pages, it just could have done with a little bit of a trimming. And I will say the writing was beautiful, but the story was a little bit convoluted. And next I'm going to be donating Foul Lady Fortune by Chloe Gone. I did like the original duology that Chloe Gone released, but I think my time in YA fantasy has come to an end. This is just when I was flicking through that I realized I no longer have interest in, so unfortunately I should have read it at the time. I will read YA from time to time. There are rereads of YA I would like to do. I'm currently rereading the whole Throne of Glass series, but I think for just the generic everyday passing of YA, I just think that time in my life has passed. But this is a really gorgeous copy, and I think it will just make someone's day to find this at a used bookstore, whether it's an adult reader who likes YA or if it is a young teen that happens to find a special edition of Foul Lady Fortune. I think it's really going to make someone's day. And if it's not tooting my own horn, I have plenty of books, and there's no reason for me to keep something I'm probably never going to read. So I am happy to give this away, but I will say I did really enjoy Chloe Gone's duology when I read it, These Violent Delights. So I enjoyed it at the time, but she's also currently releasing her first adult fantasy. I believe it's still a Shakespeare retelling, which I'm not super interested in, but I enjoyed her writing enough that I will probably look into it again as she continues to release adult fantasy. Okay, now let's go through what I actually read and enjoyed. So I read Crown of Midnight and Air of Fire this month. That's books 3 and 4 in the Throne of Glass series. I'm absolutely loving it. Books 1, 2, 3, though I loved the first time I read it, I enjoyed less this time because I know where the story's going. And book 4, which I didn't like at all last time, wound up kind of reconnecting me with the story as we pushed past the initial kind of Kane's assassin storyline, and this series grows into so much more. So I was happy by the time I got to book 4 where we're actually progressing that storyline. And then I read Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead by Emily Austen. This is one I really enjoyed. I rated this one a 4 out of 5. I had a really great time with this one. We are following a young woman, a young lesbian woman who is struggling with her mental health, struggling with grief and anxiety, and she finds a flyer that leads her to a kind of help group that will get you through your tougher moments in life, that happens to take place in the basement of a church. And when she meanders into that church, she finds herself stumbled into a new admin position for the church, and it's just a great cast of characters. I won't say too much of it because it is less than 300 pages and you can truly read this in an afternoon, but it is a really, really great story. It deals a lot with sexuality and religion and grief and mental health, and I really could not recommend this enough. It was a beautiful, pleasant surprise, and as you can see, because it has since gotten a new cover, I bought this one a while back, and thanks to my random number generator, I was reading my old TBR and loving it. Next, I read a newer one, which also makes the random number generator quite fun, that it can pick from my newest, because I did try to keep it to where I put my oldest in one section into my newest, so it does make it quite fun in that way. I picked up Reckless Girls by Rachel Hawkins. This is one that I did really enjoy. I rated it 3 out of 5 stars, which is high praise for a thriller for me, but at the time I didn't know that I was reading an Agatha Christie retelling, and I picked this up just because I had heard so much about it, and then I just happened when I was about halfway through to see on the back it said based on a Agatha Christie retelling, which kind of did spoil the rest of it for me. But I would absolutely recommend this either way. You can literally read this in an afternoon. It's a really fun summer thriller, and I will not say any more. Next, I read Small Pleasures by Claire Chambers. This is what I really enjoyed, and it was such a surprise. So this one I also rated 4 out of 5. I cannot explain what a surprise this one was. So this one we're following a journalist in the 1950s who is investigating a woman who claims that her daughter came from an immaculate conception. The cast of characters is great, the premise is amazing, and I really do think this one especially, go in as blind as possible because it was a great time. Okay, Emma has decided to make an appearance. I tried to film it while she was sleeping and kind of mid-morning, so I wouldn't have to have my AC on at the same time, but I made it most of the way through the video. So next I read 2 more random number generated from my TBR. I read Ghost by Dolly Alderton. This is one I rated 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this one. I can't speak to that enough. I love our main character, Nina. So Nina is a woman in her early 30s who has her whole life together. She's bought her first apartment in London. She's a successful cookbook writer. She has a great cast of friends, both old and new. She has a loving family, not without its faults, as her father had a stroke and is kind of experiencing a lot of memory issues, but all in all, she has a very full life. Her long-term partner that they broke up 2 to 3 years ago is now one of her best friends. So she has a life very full of love, but she mindfully took a couple of years off dating and has decided to re-enter the modern dating sphere, and it's a wild ride. I do liken it that if you liked Bridget Jones, this is a sort of modernization of that, but maybe not without a few twists and turns, I would say. Next, and this is a big one for me, I finished Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey, and I really liked it. Hello. So I am not one for sci-fi in general. I do find my attention seems to meander when it comes to all things space and spaceship related, but Leviathan Wakes was such a surprisingly accessible sci-fi that I would recommend for anyone interested in delving into more science fiction. I found this one so accessible. The pacing is amazing. It reads so fast. I was already, I think, about 100 or 150 pages in when I picked it up, and I was able to read the rest of it in a day. Mind you, all I had to do was clean my house that day, but it was just truly a book that I could not bring myself to put down. Every time I put it down, I was thinking about what was going to happen next, so I picked it right back up. And though it is a 9-book series, so I do caution, it does end in a way that this is very much book 1 and you will want to continue. And that's great for me because I don't always connect with sci-fi. I'm happy I found a series that I do, but I know for some people who are not always as keen to have science, to have series, this is quite a long one that you would be kind of tied to. Next, I read Striptease by Katie Flannery. This is one that just came up on my Kobo recommended. I subscribe to the emails, so based on what I read, and I do try to rate as I go along, it will every Tuesday give me some recommendations of the newest releases, and that was one of them. So in that book, we are following a young woman in the sort of dawn of the mid-2000s, early 2000s, as she gets a job at American Apparel. And honestly, that was another one I just couldn't put down. I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. It was, Katie Flannery was able to capture a time that I remember so clearly in my tween and teenage years, kind of the time of the hills and the resurgence of like the 70s era fashion, and I just really appreciated it. And even though it was a new release, it felt so nostalgic to a time when I was kind of coming into womanhood. So I really did like that. And last but not least, I read Lucy Yee Is Not a Romantic, and I rated that 3 out of 5 stars. Honestly, I am leaning to like a 2.5 out of 5 for my personal experience, but I don't know that the book really deserves that low of a rating. Basically, we're following a young woman named Lucy Yee who has an unfortunate history of romance. She split with her lifelong love named Mark and has been thriving in terms of work and friendship and family, but finds herself really yearning to take that next step in her life and have her firstborn child. So her friends suggest to her that there's this new kind of match.com situation where you can meet up with other eligibles who want to have a child and kind of go through the motions. Nothing, though she does get a couple of creeps that are like, I only believe in the old-fashioned way. More than not, it seems to be a group of people that are looking to go through the doctors, go through IVF, and really just co-parent in a day and age where they're not looking for a monogamous relationship or they have fertility issues, whatever the case may be. Where I rate this lower, I do say is from personal experience. So I think it was marketed as a contemporary romance, a contemporary fiction. It deals so much with the loss of a child and the grief that comes along with that. And just from my personal experience, it wasn't something that I was able to stomach for very long and something that I found was for me. I really struggled with the story it was trying to tell. And again, that's no fault of the story. It was doing a really beautiful job. I do think, and maybe it just wasn't on my Kobo edition, but I do think it would benefit to have trigger warnings at the beginning because we delve so heavily into miscarriages and everything like that. I do think it would warrant at least leaning more into it for the summary, that is going to play a very, very big part. And it's not any kind of like twist situation that I think would spoil the story, because I do know people have different opinions on trigger warnings, that it can spoil a certain portion of a story. I wouldn't even say it was anything like that. But just for me personally, it did take a lot of enjoyment out of the story, how much it had to do with miscarriages, loss, and grief. Though it handled it wonderfully, it just was not the story for me. Okay, pardon me not looking my best. I'm here editing and I needed to jump in to say I also read Red Rising by Pierce Brown, which was one of my favorite reads that month. I think I rated it a 4 or 4.5 out of 5 stars. I literally just finished book 2 and read it its entirety in like a day. So yeah, I had a great time with that. I don't feel I even need to say the synopsis. I feel like that book is hyped enough. I have a full reading vlog of where I read it, but I will say that book 1, I wasn't the most invested in. I thought it was fun. I thought it was a good ride. I understood why everybody loved it, but book 2, I am sold. I get the hype. I am in it to win it with this series, so back to the video. That is everything I read in the month of July. It was not too shabby, to be honest. I haven't kept track of my reading for a number of months now, and it is kind of fun to do, especially to keep it all in one spreadsheet. It makes it super doable. So that is it for me. I have to head to work now. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.